I'm Dean Newlund, and welcome to the Business of Intuition, where I coach, facilitate, train, and speak on the hard science and meaningful experience of intuitive leadership in business, so you can make better decisions, forge real connections, and creatively solve problems to amplify your impact and simplify your life. Welcome to the Business of Intuition.
How can companies disrupt themselves before someone else does? That provocative question became really apparent to me this last weekend. I was driving around town in Bend, Oregon, where we happen to have a house, and I drove by a little strip mall, and in that strip mall was the very last Blockbuster video store. It's become a bit of a tourist attraction, and people go and take pictures of themselves, and it's almost a museum piece. I remember the day when my wife used to call me and I was coming home from work, and she said, "Don't forget to bring home milk and a Blockbuster video." Well, those days, as you know, are gone, and Blockbuster had the option to purchase Netflix, but passed. And of course, the entire video cartridge industry has been replaced by streaming. Other types of experiences I had this last weekend, I remember I was going through a box of stuff as I was cleaning out a closet, and I found all these old pictures, wedding pictures, kid pictures, pictures of me in high school, and I realized Kodak was the ubiquitous manufacturer and developer of film. I used to go to Costco, and you would pick up all your food, and then you would go past that line near the front of the Costco, and you would go and get all of your pictures that they had been able to produce. Those days are gone because now we have cell phones that take pictures for us. So disruption is the name of the game, and it's happening at a faster and faster clip. So again, how do we be able to disrupt our own company before somebody else does? And that's really the topic of my next conversation on the business of intuition. And it happens to be in an industry called FinTech, which is another way of saying financial technology. Joe Keeley is a dynamic yet thoughtful entrepreneur and conscious leader. And as such, Mr. Keeley is the CEO and co-founder of JustiFi. That's JustiFi Technologies, a venture-backed FinTech business firm that provides payments and FinTech infrastructure and strategy for vertical SaaS platforms. Joe's got some really key insights in how important it is for any company, whether it be large or small, to start thinking about what is called this financial technology movement, whereby they can provide much better, seamless services to their clients. Joe Keeley on the Business of Intuition. So Joe, fellow Minneapolitan from St. Paul, kind of my hometown, you have this interesting story about one of your jobs that you got early on. Tell us about that story and how that led to your current company.
Sure. Well, it is a bit of a winding road. So, hold on, I suppose. But I was a student at university. I was playing hockey at university and answered an ad in Minnesota, as you mentioned, answered an ad that perhaps is only in Minnesota or maybe Massachusetts as well. And it said, it was in the newspaper, which dates me a little bit, I suppose, and said, I was looking for a summer job, and it said, looking for a hockey player to watch our two boys, and, $10 an hour or something. And I'm like, well, I'm a hockey player. That sounds great. So I answered this ad, and little did I know that was going to change the trajectory of my life and define, the next decade and a half in my, what would then be my career.
Before you tell that story real quick, why do they want a hockey player?
Well, it's Minnesota, and you see having a built-in coach and, just elevates. Well, soon I'd find out. I got this job working for this family of two physicians, and like all parents, regardless of means, they're doing the best that they can to try to, insert role models. And role model was something we really used in our company later, this aspirational term. But I came the first day and I reintroduced myself to the 9-year-old and said, hey, I play hockey at University of St. Thomas. We're going to hang out this summer. I wasn't quite comfortable in saying I'm your nanny. And he said, oh, that's very cool. I'm going to play hockey at Harvard. And I said, oh, I've heard of it. I guess we better get to work. And I became kind of chef, chauffeur, referee, coach, etc. Yes, to work on their hockey a little bit, but hopefully, and I do know a lot more than that, to really be their sort of big brother role model figure, because it's this notion that it takes a village to help, raise these kiddos. So I worked with that family for 3 years. It was, built long-term relationships with them. And then, the great thing about, being a student and having a business idea is the bar is really low. Anyway, I started a headhunting business, which morphed into a staffing business, which morphed into a franchise company after graduation, which turned into a technology platform. And sort of fast forward through this, started a company that ended up becoming the largest employer of nannies and babysitters in the US. And we had locations in the UK, 200 different franchise locations. It was called College Nannies and Tutors, added sitters as well, and sold that company to Bright Horizons Family Solutions, a company out of Boston. And the boys did go to Harvard. So
did they play hockey though?
They did. That was sort of their ticket in there. But learned a number of things in the twists and turns. That was sort of my graduate school in business, so to speak, is scaled that company, and it was a tremendous learning experience, of course, and in disrupting that, at least at the time, that space, which was still very, not a lot of technology used to book a babysitter, and we took it to the place where we recruited, interviewed, screened, trained, certified these, what we called role models, and then actually activated on a platform that allows parents to, always, rely on having a sitter that they can trust in their purse, on their smartphone, booking them 24 hours a day. So that we had quite a journey, and being through that, was a college student when I started, met a girl, got married, had kiddos. That really shaped sort of how we really basically built what we needed at home.
Yeah, understood. So for those who may not really have a full understanding, when you mention the word FinTech or financial technology, give us some examples just to get our brains around that. Because someone will go, I don't know what he's talking about. Give us some examples about what financial technologies are so that we have a sort of a visceral understanding about what you're talking about.
Sure. And I think that, going back after being done with that company, joined forces with a venture firm in town and a number of folks that had started a number of technology companies to start our current company, JustiFi, which, really enables other companies to harness the power of FinTech. But going back, FinTech or financial technology, that's a term that's thrown around an awful lot. So what exactly does it mean? Financial technology and embedded finance, it is really taking, when you think of goods and services that are oftentimes provided historically by banks and other like institutions, it's leveraging technology to make those offers, provide those services within some other piece of technology. So a lot of banks rely on fintechs, but what's happening now, in one of the famous, sayings of one of the venture capitalists, Mark Andreessen, and I'll paraphrase, is, soon every company will be a fintech company. Said differently, every company will harness the power of some embedded financial service or product within their ecosystem. So what does that look like? If you have a bunch of customers and you sell them your good or service or software, what else do you have the right or ability to sell them or offer them that actually makes their life so much more, convenient or easy, because you have their eyeballs, or you're working with them in a way. So what is an example of this? You look at Toast. It's a company that many restaurants use to provide software, hardware to run their restaurant. And we use it as customers to maybe place your takeout order. Well, they charge for their software, but they also offer lending and they monetize payments and they do that. You look at Starbucks. Starbucks has their app. Great. Mm-hmm. We're all loading what turns out to be billions and billions of dollars on their app. Some have referred to Starbucks as a bank because of the balance that they're holding. So those are two very different sort of definitions of utilizing FinTech inside of a company today. So that's our current company, JustiFi. We help make, FinTech possible and bring it to be a little bit more fair, accelerate that potential for companies large and small that want to harness that power.
So in a sense, are you saying that a really, really rudimentary way of putting this, that it's ways in which companies could be almost like a version of a bank, where they're providing resources for being able to connect with people financially? They might actually hold a certain amount of, like say, for example, a Starbucks card. I've got $25 right now. They're holding that until the next time I use it. That almost feels like a bank in a way.
Yeah, I mean, banking is one viewpoint, and a lot of folks say, "Well, I don't want to be a bank," and they're probably right. They don't, and there's a lot of regulations there. But when you think about what is sort of the playbook of a platform or an ecosystem that, sometimes, if you look at a large company, they have a lot of customers, and their customers have customers, and how might they participate in embedded finance? Or FinTech, if it were, to make those customers or their customers' life easier or enhance that. It could be, just what transactions or money is flowing outside of their ecosystem. How could they bring that in? So the tip of the spear usually is payments. A lot of folks offer digital payments. What the cost of the payment that everyone thinks is not really the cost of the payment, so that companies that are facilitating that could and arguably should make a margin off of that funds flow. And once you have that, if you're capturing their data in the right way, you could then start offering your customers loans. Because actually most companies today have more data than the bank does. So, and you need data to offer these sort of services. So if you have a platform or a company that you have a number of customers and when they get a big order to place, that might be a really good time to offer, an embedded purchase order loan. And you don't have to do it off your own balance sheet. You can leverage other financial institutions and FinTech with the right software to do that. And why would you do that? I think the first is you would make your relationship with your customer stickier. You're adding value to them. Yeah. And two, you get to now participate in the economics of that transaction, oftentimes without even taking, bank or balance sheet risk. Right. So this is what we're talking about when, we need to leverage FinTech tools, or every company is going to be a FinTech company. Whenever you hear absolute statements, it sort of should be a little bit of a red flag, like every company, like maybe not, but really peeling back the layer of the onion to try to understand how could I leverage this. But I think in general, these opportunities used to be reserved for a very select few, probably those legacy banks that we're talking about. But now with the acceleration of technology and these other tools, it is getting much closer to true that every company can leverage the power of embedded finance or act like a FinTech company, using these things that otherwise weren't available 5-10 years ago.
So you mentioned the word disruption. This is certainly a disruptive way to be able to solve some business problems. How have you been able to get people to see this? I mean, for some it's going to be out of their mental framework. How have you been able to bridge that gap? I've been able to convince them that this is a value to them, because in some ways, you're selling a service, but you're also selling a mindset.
That's right. And so there's definitely education that goes in on. And we oftentimes, at JustiFi, we work with software platforms. So they tend to be in that mindset already. And what we end up then, so that's helpful. If someone says, yes, I operate this software platform or this large, ecosystem of customers, and I would like to, they're in search of new revenue, or I would like to make sure that I disrupt myself so someone else doesn't come in and disrupt me for larger companies. And making your platform or your relationships with your customers stickier is a great way to do that. We really help shift that mindset and then accelerate their potential. So it's first believing that, yes, my company, we have FinTech potential, but how? And a lot, the bigger the company, the more sort of, overwhelming or challenging it is to just, because it's non-core, usually. They sell product X, and now you want me to sell insurance or lending or monetize payments. So it's really, once you change the mindset that, yes, this is possible, you kind of have to break down the old way of thinking that this is going to require you to build lots of tech or become, as we talked about earlier, a bank or something crazy like that. I think it's similar to thinking about think how difficult it was not so long ago to even get a web page.
Yeah.
Right. You had to hire developers and they had to write code, and then you had to have a server in the closet that then you hosted said web page on. And now it's sort of laughable because you can go on to many tools. You can have a web page in seconds. It's hosted in the cloud at AWS or Microsoft Azure, and no one would ever think or dream of saying, well, can you please show me where your servers are in your closet so I can know where you store your data and your website? Right. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So we're there as it relates to FinTech and embedded financial products and services. So, large and small companies, for small companies, this can be a tremendous way to make their relationships with their customers stickier, add value, and accelerate their revenue. For large companies, they could literally be sitting on a gold mine and make their relationships with their customers stickier by turning some of these tools on. Now, it's different for each business or platform, but sort of the future is here.
So it sounds like what you're saying here, Joe, is that we should really be paying close attention to this, because if we don't do something about it, somebody else will. To your point, the website development was once something that took a lot of energy and effort, but now it's almost ubiquitous, and we could do it in our pajamas at night because we've got so much automation right now. We were talking about this before we started the conversation. ChatGPT is oh my God, that's going to change, a lot of copywriting and who knows what else. It's going to be a game changer. That's a disruption. So I'm getting that we got to pay attention to this. How fast is this industry growing?
Oh, it's sort of mind-numbing to think about how big the industry is, period. When you start stacking up lending, insurance, payments alone is trillions upon trillions of dollars. When you think about how money moves digitally, it starts getting measured in, percentages of GDP, so
wow.
that's usually
pretty big
when you start thinking of it that way. So I think, companies thinking about how, if you really start and say the customers that we have in our platform, if they're a software platform, but also think about platform broader, our customers in our ecosystem, how might we add value to them? You can't just say, I want to, lend you money, or I want to connect you to lenders, or you have to add value. So what products or services in the embedded financial world, where are your customers spending money already? And would it be more convenient if they could just get that from you? So, or how can, a lot of times customers are wanting to be in one place. They call that really the system of record. And if a company can become that system of record, that one place of truth that they're, engaged with, that's a really valuable position. But if they have to go out of that ecosystem to pay for something or invoice something or do payroll or whatever it happens to be, that's an opportunity and a risk that someone else could start pulling that customer further away from you. So by embedding, financial products and services inside of one's ecosystem, you make that relationship more sticky. By adding value to those customers, which makes you look good, and that's great. It's also a defensive strategy because, someone else is, is going to have a harder time taking them away from you. And, the final kicker is there's actually a lot of money to be made because someone's making that money. And by bringing it in, it can really be a new revenue stream for platforms and a lucrative one at that.
Well, let's just play this out for a second. So I want you to kind of brainstorm with me on this. So that's from a small company perspective, maybe a medium-sized company perspective, because maybe some people listening in on this will go, I'm in that boat and I can understand why this is valuable. So like say us, we're a small company, right? We're a consulting organization. We do training and development. We do executive coaching. We do a lot of facilitations. Right now, we really don't have much online with respect to people purchasing programs. We probably will. But how would a service provider, you could be a lawyer, it could be any number of different type of professional services. How could FinTech actually be a really benefit to their clients if they were interacting with their consulting organization using some of these techniques? What would these tools be that you might suggest?
Yeah, I think it starts to get more difficult when you get down to sort of a one-to-one relationship in a service environment. Who we oftentimes work with is, let's say that there's a software provider that attorney uses. So they're using a CRM, they're using, a system that they use to run their business. Now, we work with that software provider to then there are embedded financial products and tools that can help that ecosystem just simply run better. So I subscribe to this software as a lawyer and I run my practice, and that's great. But I want to collect money from my clients. So having an ability to have embedded payments, meaning I send a bill out as that attorney, and that software company now, in addition to the SaaS fees or software as a service fees, they're making money now on the arbitrage between what they charge for payments and what it actually costs them. So that's sort of item one. And then two, let's say that my particular job as an attorney, I have a number of customers that may struggle with paying their bills. And I don't want to be in the collections business because I want to practice law. So the software provider could offer a buy now, pay later product. We've seen those in retail a lot. Or they could offer another version of that, which is just financing for that through a third party. So these are all sort of value add, but there is margin to be made for the platform.
Yes.
The software platform, and maybe even, some of that shared with, and there's incentive for that attorney to use these sort of things. But when you start going upstream a little bit, where the software company, or let's say it's a very older school company that has some platforms in terms of software, but has an ecosystem of customers. And those customers, usually when you have a B2B to C relationship, that's when these sort of opportunities really start to light up.
All right, so let me shift gears here a little bit, Joe. So I'm thinking here about what comes to mind is a book called How the Mighty Fall. Jim Collins got a successful company. They get a little cocky. They keep doubling down on their recipe of success, and yet the industry is changing. The disruptions are coming and nipping at their heels, and all of a sudden, we've got a Blockbuster is no longer a company because Netflix blew it, or what have you, Kodak or BlackBerry. There's a lot of different types of organizations that we can point to. So this idea that disruption is coming, but that we also have this human characteristics of blind spots. We just don't see, we don't know what we don't know. Do you have any sort of exercises or questions that a team may want to go through in order to know where there are blind spots or where they need to look to industry about what could be disruptive that could affect them at some point? How do we prepare for the disruption that's coming? And how do we know what questions to ask to even know what that is?
Sure. And I think that what a lot of folks should do is just simply ask their kids, I suppose, because they're on the bleeding edge of what's coming. And I say that only half joking. The serious part is that, a lot of times when you think about how do customers of today and tomorrow want to interact, when we go back to the finance, to the FinTech space, what sort of payment methods are they using? How are they communicating with each other? All of this is what is the user interfaces and the user experience that they want to have. And will not just want to have, will demand and will vote with their dollars. So I think when you start thinking about where folks can be disruptive, I always like to start with what is the user experience and what outside of your industry is influencing the bar. So what do I mean by that? Like, thank you, Apple, Amazon, Google, you have raised the bar on what my expectations are as a consumer, as a business person. I expect to not have to read a manual and just something works. And in fact, it talks to my phone and just transfers the contacts. So now that experience is going to transcend a whole bunch of other industries that you could say isn't fair. Let's say you're in the logistics business. Okay, they don't expect to have a big issue porting data.
Right.
They might. When you talk about Netflix Blockbuster, that is largely initially it was a user experience that got them. It's like, well, I don't want it. When we live in Minnesota here, like, I don't want to get in the car and go get a movie. Why don't you just initially mail it to me?
Right.
And then
it lasts for a while. Yeah,
they did, and with great success. And then they figured out the streaming, and I just want to push play. So, I don't even want to think about what I want to watch next. Why don't you just serve that up to me? So that is largely starts with a user experience. And then I would say when you have a really good, and disruption often doesn't happen like a car crash. It can, but it's over time, so it might be harder to see for these larger companies. But what is that user experience? What else could you sell to your customers? What else could you facilitate that is going to make their life easier? That certainly changes the user experience if it doesn't even change the user interface. But thinking in that way, is oftentimes what gets the juices flowing in our world, which is enabling embedded finance for platforms and ecosystems to, harness that power.
Yeah. So Joe, if there's like one message you would like people to know, what is it?
Well, I think that perfection is, especially the larger companies that are maybe talking about this disruption and how, they're worried about making mistakes, and that is probably their blind spot. So, getting started on a journey, is the most important step. It's not about, making sure everything is perfect. And when we think about, embedded finance or FinTech, I think that if it is very likely when it's brought up, especially the larger the organization, the more likely this is, that's crazy. We sell widgets, or it's like, well, to continue to give it another chance. Cause I think, as we talked about, if you're not constantly thinking about disrupting yourself, then you're vulnerable of someone else disrupting you.
Yes, that's right. That's a great way to end this. I think that's actually a great message, because, we double down on what makes us successful, but that also could prevent us from seeing what is right in front of us that could be disruptive if we're not paying attention. So Joe, how can people follow you, get to know more about what you're about, understand how you might be able to serve what they're trying to do?
Yeah, my pleasure. So our company's JustiFi Technologies. It's, JustiFi.ai. And we help accelerate the FinTech potential of software companies and platforms, large and small.
I have to ask, do you still play hockey?
I do. I'm now I now don a whistle, so I'm a coach now.
You're a coach. Are you a skier?
That's right. A little bit, yeah.
Yep. Been to Afton Alps?
Of course, yeah.
Yep.
My daughter's on the ski team, so I'm usually there judging a gate or something and not skiing.
Yeah, that's great. It reminds me of my show that I was on their ski team way, way back, and also at Central High School. And I know those little bumps in the road called mountains back then.
That's
Out
right.
here on the West Coast, it's a completely different experience. I never realized that, skiing was not necessarily just about going over ice. You could actually ski in powder. I didn't realize that until much later. Different experience altogether. Hey, it was great to talk to you. Best of luck to you.
Thanks so much. Good to meet you. Bye.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to The Business of Intuition. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com.